I'm Frank.
I'm Tom.
I'm Justin. I haven't slept at all like the past few nights. I don't know what it is.
Oh, then don't drink coffee. It's 7 o'clock at night. 8 o'clock at night. Jesus.
Don't tell me what to do. I love coffee.
I also love coffee. I'm now at the point where coffee doesn't actually help me be awake. It just helps me be mildly functional.
Yeah, you're right.
And then if I drink it at a certain time, then I'm just awake for the rest of the night.
Yeah.
Coffee now has no effect on my brain. I drink so much. I mean, the way caffeine works is that your brain makes smoke, and that smoke is called adenosine. And your brain has little adenosine sensors inside of it. And when there's a lot, your brain goes, oh shit, there's all this exhaust from the brain, so it's time to turn off and wash it all out with sleep. And what caffeine does is it binds with those adenosine receptors so they can't experience the higher levels. So it doesn't really give you energy so much as it prevents you from feeling tired.
Yeah, that's actually... because that is kind of a good way to describe the feeling that it's always given me. Like, it never made me feel jittery. It just always made me feel not tired.
Yeah, and that's why I find if I've been up all night, I try not to drink it because in the morning because my brain will just start glitching out on me, and I'll have a really bad time.
Yeah.
I'll drink a nice cup of tea. I'll have a cuppa.
A cuppa?
A cuppa?
A cuppa? A couple of lumps of sugar in my tea.
We're about to
Drinking
launch
my
into a Frank song.
How's it feeling? Hey, you.
You guys discuss how you guys are doing, and I'm going to go get myself a cup of coffee.
Jesus.
Come on.
No one cares what's up with me. Just go.
Oh, God.
How are you doing, Jay baby?
I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah. How's the library?
The library's good.
How does it feel to be not Garnes and Global?
I thought my being away from there would make me less angry at the place.
Same, and it didn't, but it did make me less depressed.
Yes.
I was immediately depressed in the aftermath of it for circumstantial reasons.
Yeah.
But I have been, like, my mood is just leaps and bounds better than it was when I had to walk into that place every day.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, Blair and Blanchard.
I also started playing Pokemon Go again for no reason.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why.
Go.
I do not know why.
Play Hollow Knight.
No.
Have a Switch. You have a Nintendo Switch. You have one of the most perfect video game systems ever designed.
No, I'm replaying Stardew Valley.
Oh yeah, no, you gotta. You don't even have to replay Stardew Valley. You just keep playing Stardew Valley.
Well, here's the thing. I played it once, and then I married. I forget her name.
The purple hair.
No,
Abigail.
The artist. The red-haired artist.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And then
Big mistake, I think, because Abigail's father is the wizard.
yeah, but she's also a child. She's also conspicuously one of the children that you can bang.
No, I haven't played Stardew Valley in a while.
They live with their parents.
That doesn't make them a child.
That's true. That's accurate. But there are other ones who have their own lives and their own places, and I feel more comfortable pursuing them.
That's fair, because you do essentially live alone in a shack.
Yeah. Here's the thing that I find weird about it and made me uncomfortable is playing that sort of game and your own personality and choices go into picking your mate. So yeah, I would love to marry Leah. She's like this badass artist. But then I get married to her and she just stands in my house creepily, and I feel depressed that I ruined her life.
Oh, it's like in Skyrim. When you marry somebody in Skyrim, they basically just become an animatronic statue that lives in your house.
Yeah, it's so depressing. And then we had kids and everything, and I was like, I'm living a goddamn lie. So I divorced her and had the witch erase her memory, and I got rid of the kids.
Jesus Christ.
And then I felt bad doing that, so I had to start over again.
What if that's
See,
how...
When I play Stardew Valley, I just start a mayonnaise empire.
What if that's
I go in the mine a lot. Tom, T-Baby, how you doing? Are you still shackled to Glarns and Global?
I am. I don't think that's going to be the case for too much longer.
Because you came back with Blair and Blancher returned.
I'm not going to leave that in the episode.
That's no one's real name.
There's the one Aussie listener.
Oi.
Who's Blair and Blancher?
Who do these tosses think they...
Oi, my government just elected a fascist.
Oh, God.
I believe is what happened in Australia. I don't follow it that well. That was the impression that I got. Neither do I. How you doing, Tom?
I'm doing okay.
Are you better now that the Picard trailer is out?
That straight up gave me goosebumps.
Oh, my God.
Now, okay. Me and Justin were talking a little off pod about this. Now, he is very nearly done TNG.
Very nearly. I've got like 20 episodes left, but I am.
So you're like season 6?
No, season 7. Like
season 7. Okay, yeah. Because they did 24 episode seasons. Yeah.
And
I haven't watched the movies.
So there's 2 good ones.
I'm gonna watch all of them.
God love you.
Yeah, they're half bad because I think there's only 4 movies.
And he hasn't seen the resolution of TNG, and I have, and have I. And I've also seen the movie with. So this is like some sort of alternate timeline universe that doesn't have to do with the series finale of TNG.
No, it's linear.
What?
I think it's supposed to be a linear timeline because the event that happens that causes Picard to be in the state that he's in is the event that causes the birth of the J.J. Abrams movie universe. Because Picard exists in the same timeline as old Spock, because that Spock was in the 2-part episode Reunification. He meets Kirk, he meets Scotty and Bones, etc. So those characters exist in Picard's timeline. The destruction of Romulus causes the wormhole that creates the Kelvin universe, that creates Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto and etc.
I've never felt more that I wanted you here in the room with us recording, Frank, so I could kick the shit out of you, you fucking nerd. Oh my God, go on.
So the destruction of Romulus is what causes the creation of the J.J. Abrams verse.
I didn't know that. I kind of nerdily like that they're it's all one universe, including the original series. And
well, do you not remember the beginning of the J.J. Abrams movie? That's how it starts.
Nope, do not remember it.
Yeah. So it starts with the event that they're talking about, which is the destruction of Romulus.
All I know is that I want a case of that Picard wine.
Oh yeah, Chateau
baby.
Picard wine, baby. They're gonna release it. They better.
I can't wait for who gets saddled with that job of making the special run of the companion wine. Like,
it's going to be a shitty winery, though.
Yeah, because no serious winery is going to make fucking Chateau Picard.
It's going to be like Jeff Bridges' wine company.
No, it's going to be the company that Orson Welles did those commercials for.
It's going to be the company that I'm going to get to it in a second, but for the Game of Thrones series finale,
no, they make good beers. You just had one of the shitty ones.
What I got was a beer wine hybrid thing, and it tasted like absolute shit.
They have made good Game of Thrones beers. That you're talking about Ommegang Brewery, they have made really good Game of Thrones and good beers in general in the past. Every once in a while, one of their Game of Thrones beers was dog shit because they experimented too hard.
Yeah, don't experiment, beer alcohol makers.
They did one beer, and I don't know shit about Game of Thrones, but they did one beer called Hand of the Queen, and it was a beer for Tyrion, quote unquote, and it was a really good beer.
Nice. Well, I mean, I'm glad something good came out of.
Do we want to talk about it,
Justin?
So, ladies and gentlemen, real politics is depressing, right? Shit's happening that we don't even want to talk about because it's too sad. Mm-hmm. What we really want to talk about is fake politics involving what is it on that show? Dragons and wizards and
monsters. And
are there elves?
There are no elves. Okay. Let me take you back like 6 years ago. I'm a little chubby boy, like 24 years old.
Almost spit beer on my laptop.
My final semester of college, and people keep talking about Game of Thrones. It's 2 seasons in. I'm like, this is bullshit. Fuck that shit. I hate you. Stop talking to me. And then one morning,
talk to me so I can sit silently in the corner of my classroom.
Yes.
In my fedora.
So one morning, early morning, instead of working on my final project, I put on the first episode of Game of Thrones. And then I watched the second and the third. Halfway through the day, my mother had made me a chicken pot pie. They went on vacation. So I was just eating this big chicken pot pie all day. Halfway through, I go buy a case of Newcastle Brown Ale.
Oh, wow.
And I binged the first season of Game of Thrones, and I drink a case of beer, and I eat a chicken pot pie, and it was the happiest day of my life. I then proceeded to devour all of the books.
And the pot pie.
And the pot pie, and I was hooked. And there was that beautiful day. There was the day when I read in the book The Red Wedding, and I threw the book away from me. I remember watching The Red Wedding and just feeling numb for hours. And I thought, this is strange how a television show can really make you feel this thing. When Jaime Lannister shockingly gets his hand chopped off, and then a rock and roll song plays over the credits, they would experiment, do things like that to really make you feel. They put effort into this show. And then season 7 happened. And they moved past the books, and season 7 was a bad season. Okay, that's fine. And then season 8 comes along, and okay, so people get angry at art and artists. People make petitions, and that is so stupid. Especially with art that you disagree with, you don't like how they did it. These are artists who are making choices that you might not like, but they put the effort in. Game of Thrones, we have the right to be angry at because the showrunners could have gone on for as long as they wanted. They shortened the seasons. They did not put the effort in. They are talentless hacks. And hey, you fucking Star Wars nerds, you fucking dweebs. These are the guys who are because you fucking freaked out so much. Rian Johnson's trilogy is being taken away from him, and he could have done interesting things. And you get these fucking Game of Thrones slobs taking over your beloved franchise, putting in the minimum of effort, the minimum of talent, and where your petition's going to get you then, you fucking idiots.
Go off, King. So what did you not like about this specific?
So speaking of, here's the thing. All of the plot points, I don't disagree with. I think all of them are interesting. Bran becoming king makes zero sense in the fucking show because they were leading up to this whole time. They knew where they were going, and they leave him out of a whole fucking season. They don't put any effort into creating a character of him, and so he's just a fucking walking meme. The books... Okay, that makes sense. So I feel spoiled for the fucking books, but we're never going to get them because that fucking morbidly obese nerd is going to die. And fine, do what you want. That's fine, but don't fucking go out on tours, interview tours, and go on fucking TV. You are wasting everybody's time. It's the same thing, both of them. Both sides are people who just got bored with the product they're making, and which is a goddamn shame because they could have left us with a piece of art. Now, in my opinion, a piece of art that adds no value to the world. It's purely just a story, a decent story, but nothing more. But what they're left with is disappointment and failure. It's a goddamn shame, but oh well. You know, I'm moving on. I'm currently watching The Leftovers. I love that show. There's a lot of great art out there, people. And yeah, you can be upset. You can be disappointed. Sometimes, like with this situation, you can feel a little angry, but it's art. There's a lot of it out there. Find what you love. I mean, fuck those guys, though. It's fucking bullshit. They fucking ruined it.
Came out of nowhere.
So, speaking of politics, this whole fucking thing led up to, guess what, guys? Samuel Tarly invents democracy. Wow. Great. Oh, good for you.
Good for you. McGee, do you want me to smash your lights? You want me to fucking smash them?
Which also, he started writing the books in the 90s, and I could see how, oh, cool, yeah, that's a nice, flipping the script. Oh, good for you. You dunked on Tolkien, you fucking fat piece of shit. You fucking loser. Don't you fucking talk shit about Tolkien. He created a piece of art that is full of love and fellowship and the deep humanity and empathy, and what you created was, the kings are bad and monsters are bad, but people are badder too. Power hungry women are coming for you. Oh, fuck you, you fucking piece of shit. And here's the thing. In the 90s, yes, that's a nice, cool, interesting thing. But for it to end, this show to be leading up to the invention of democracy, when we see what our current climate...
Yeah, maybe democracy was bad.
Yeah, let's bring back the fucking dragons.
So I've never watched an episode of the show.
I'm very happy that Sansa is queen in the North, and Arya didn't do anything the last two episodes, and I've got a lot of issues. You can read about it on any site on the internet. I agree with all of them.
So I've never watched an episode of the show. My main problem with it was the fact that there was this big existential threat that they were building up to for 8 seasons.
Yeah.
And they resolve it in an hour and a half in the middle of the season.
See, even then I was optimistic because I thought that kind of blew my mind because I thought, oh, they're going somewhere with this. No, they're not.
No, they're not.
They went nowhere with anything. Things just happened. And in the books I can see where they're coming from. That like, oh, there's this big existential supernatural threat, but you know, humanity is what we should really look out for. You didn't earn it. You didn't earn it. Hey, D&D, you didn't earn a goddamn thing. And you're being rewarded. Whereas somebody who tried something in a big genre type thing, like a Rian Johnson, is punished by the outcries of the fans. You guys are getting to continue on.
You know it is going to be good, though.
What's that?
The Deadwood movie.
Ooh, baby!
It looks good.
It looks good. It looks fun. We're going to get there.
We're going to get there next week.
Oh, yeah. Shit.
That's next week, baby. Tom, have you seen an episode of Deadwood?
Nope.
It's a great show. It made Justin cry quite a lot.
It did.
Well, that puts it in
a category with everything. Lads.
Yes?
Do you hear?
I say tell everyone everything. Why cover anything up? Right?
How to describe Frank?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, there's the head, of course.
He never takes it off. You think it's weird? Would it help if I said my facial expressions out loud? Welcoming smile.
Delighted look.
But what goes on inside the head, inside that head,
I find this inspiring.
is music.
Something is pressing something is!
Frank, people should know about you. You should be famous.
Flattered grin, followed by a bashful half smile.
Stop saying your facial expressions out loud. It's extremely annoying.
We've been offered a really important gig, South by Southwest, in Texas.
People are interested in us.
We could be big.
What game are you playing? Filling Frank's head with these ideas?
I can't hear you over the sound of the bubbles.
Someone needs to punch you in the face.
Here we go.
It's gonna be huge! You gotta come see us tomorrow night. I promise we'll be vandal.
Frank's not okay.
Frank, come back!
With all his issues, 100% sanest cat I've ever met.
Okay. The head. Take it off.
I have a certificate. Here it is, my most likable song ever. Coca-Cola, lipstick ring, go dance all night, kiss me, just kiss me, Nefertiti.
This is your most likable song ever?
Yeah.
People will love it.
Some music in the distance.
Guys, enough talking about the Picard show. That was a beautiful Klingon opera, Justin.
Justin interrupted my flawless Christopher Walken impression with his Captain Beefheart bit.
That was clearly the Buk-tuk, traditional war song, also used in mating.
I am rock hard.
You can't see it at home.
I can see it. It's visible on my computer screen, which is wild. You can see that from space. Justin, you're packing heat.
Oh, jeez.
Much like the star of our film.
Ooh, Michael Fassbender's got a famously big hog.
Oh my god.
He has a huge penis, which makes a scene in this movie very funny, and we'll get to it. Boys, what are we talking about?
Jesus Christ.
I don't know anymore.
We are talking about the 2014 comedy film directed by Lenny Abrahamson, Frank.
Frank? It's a freaking Frankisode.
That's a freaking Frankisode.
Oh my god, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to see a theme running through this episode.
What?
Of two things.
What? One and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a name theme of two things and me.
So Frank, tell us about this film.
Yeah, tell us about it.
So this is a film co-written by a famous journalist named John Ronson, based on a newspaper article / real-life experience that he wrote. It concerns a character named John, after him, played by Donald Gleason. And John lives in a small town in coastal England, but aspires to be a songwriter. While walking along the beach, John witnesses a man trying to drown himself. The man is revived, but taken to the hospital. John talks to Don, played by Scoot McNairy, last seen to most audiences on season 3 of True Detective.
Oh, shit. I didn't recognize
that was him.
him.
That was the dad.
He's great.
He is great. Who explains the man was a keyboardist in an experimental band called how do you fucking pronounce their name again?
Son of
Furbs, managed by him. John mentions that he plays keyboards and is invited to play with in town that night. John goes along and meets the rest of the band, all of whom are reluctant about John, except for Frank, the band's leader, who constantly wears a papier-mâché mask over his head. The concert goes well until Clara, played by Maggie Gyllenhaal, breaks the theremin and storms out. Bake 'em away, toys.
No.
Oh. Ooh. Okay. So I watched this movie twice in the past week, and I had very different experiences having finished watching it and watching it the first time. I don't know about you guys, but I felt like the opening sequence where we hear the inner melodic monologue of John as he's trying to come up with a song in a comedic thing, and then the thing where he's like living with his parents and he has a day job and he goes upstairs to write a little song or try to write a song, but it turns out to be Must Be Love.
Yeah.
The Madness version.
Okay, idea for a song in A minor, possible title Suburbia. I dream of an angel, down to E in the bass, to take me away, to G, take me away, C, from these little boxes, back to A. I dream of an angel up there to take. Oh, hang on. Fuck. It's madness. A fucking madness song.
Which in the montage they show somebody on the bus listening to for like 3 seconds.
And he was like a super sympathetic character, and then sort of you're introduced to the band, and you don't know them yet. And in that at least in my first run through, I was very skeptical. I was expecting this to be like almost like a pseudo horror film, like The Cult of Frank, and all that. Yeah. But that's not how things went. And the second viewing, the characters, unbeknownst to the audience, are fully just doing what they seem like they would do. Mm-hmm. And it's very consistent in that way.
Now that opening segment sequence could be released as like a short on the internet, and it's so accurate. It's such a great setup and punchline, and it really sets up the character very well, which is he's talented, but he's
not that talented.
Yeah, and that sets up the whole film.
Yes, and there's a scene that we'll talk about in the big middle segment that proves that like the problem isn't necessarily that he's not totally talented. The problem is that his sensibilities are more conventional than theirs are.
Yeah. Throughout the film, it starts in the opening segment, and it continues throughout. And I think it's the worst handled aspect of the movie. It's kind of cringy, but it's like supposed to be a bit, but it also doesn't feel lived like so much of the rest of the film does. His use of social media.
See, I think that was the most accurate thing, one of the most accurate things in the movie, other than his like losing, like he gets a creative impulse for a song and then he's got it, and then he loses it for a second, and then it turns out to be a song that's already been written.
Yeah.
But like there's something near the end that's very true to life with social media. So we'll get there.
I think absolutely, but I think so much of the rest of the film feels experienced by the creators. Because it can't. One, it obviously was. We know that. And two, there are so many things about this movie that are so fucking real that they couldn't have just been made up without having experienced them. I do believe that the social media stuff is made up.
Oh, it's 100% made up. So the thing is, John Ronson, the guy who wrote this movie, is a journalist. He's written a lot of pretty famous books. He wrote The Psychopath Test. He wrote The Men Who Stare at Goats. He wrote So You've Been Publicly Shamed. But this was based on a real-life experience of his where he was a keyboard player in England for an English musician named Chris Spivey, who had a comedy music character named Frank Sidebottom, who wore a papier-mâché mask during performances, but he did not wear it all the time the way the Frank character wears it in this film. And there was a very distinct difference of this is Chris Spivey being a comedy character versus this version of Frank, which is an American sort of outsider artist. And we'll talk a little bit more as the movie goes on about like Daniel Johnston, Wesley Willis type stuff that this movie represents.
Yeah.
Last note on the social media thing is that this was made in 2014, and while I agree that there's sort of, especially as it becomes more important to the plot of the film, that there's a little bit of a deafness to how social media works, but sort of writing a tweet as inane as working hard all day on songs, time for dinner, hashtag nom nom nom. That was par for the terrible course in 2014.
Yeah.
Yes, that is how people tweeted.
I feel like we're all way more cynical now.
Yeah.
And way more cognizant of how no one cares. And
yeah, because Trump became president through Twitter.
Yeah. So, onward.
Onward and upward.
And twirling.
Up and at them.
Up and at them.
Not sideways. Not forward, but upward, and twirling, twirling, twirling to a brighter tomorrow. Frank invites John to become a full-time member of the band. He accompanies them to Ireland, where they plan to record their debut album in a remote cabin until they get it done, which ends up being for the next year. Don becomes depressed and explains to John that he wants to be a songwriter but is terrible. He plays a song for John, who compliments it. The next morning, after completing work on their album, John finds what appears to be Frank's corpse hanging from a tree. He calls the rest of the band down and they remove the mask, only to find it was Don wearing one of Frank's masks. Don is cremated, and it is revealed that Don was the original keyboard player. John reveals he has been posting the band's recording sessions on YouTube and Twitter. The Sorampers have gained a small fan following and have been invited to play South by Southwest. Clara displays contempt to John, and they end up having sex in a hot tub.
Yes, they do.
But she threatens to stab him if the trip to America screws up. Who wrote this?
Sorry. So my favorite Wikipedia synopsis was my parents were watching Last Chance Harvey, and I was half watching it and I didn't care to finish, so I went on Wikipedia to check how it ended, and the Wikipedia said Harvey walks out into the street and gets hit by a car and dies. And that's how I thought it ended forever, and it's not how that ends.
That's a bit of irony here.
I will say the segment that was just summarized by Tom makes up the bulk of the film.
Yes.
Is their recording in Ireland. And a little bit earlier than this is when I realized that I like the music that the band is playing more than I liked any of the songs that the John character was coming up with.
Oh, yeah.
No, that was
like
that was meant to be instrumental to the plot. That John was shit.
That he was not good.
No,
and it threads through to the end. Like you realize at the end that his music is supposed to be not good. But at first I was like, wait, are they trying to say that his music is better than theirs? Because it's not.
No,
No, I don't think that was ever their goal.
Watching this movie again, part of the thing that really strikes me, and I don't know if you would agree with this, Tom, is that so much of my time as an artist has been that struggle, that fear of, am I a John or am I a Frank?
You're a me Frank. I don't know if you're a him Frank.
Oh, no!
I'm kidding. You are much more of a him Frank. Ladies and gentlemen, Justin semi-recently did a Christmas album like 6 months ago now.
My fourth.
Where there is a track on it where it's Justin. What were you smoking weed with Santa?
What?
And
I would not do that to the beloved Santa Claus.
well, you modulated your voice to such a degree that it sounded like everybody was just either stoned or tripping balls the whole time. And you said you were going to beat somebody's ass.
Oh, yeah. This movie, I named 2 movies that that really capture something of at least my experience of making music more than any others. And this isn't necessarily a judgment of quality of the films, though I like them, but the truth that they have in them, and those are this movie, and especially this middle segment, and the movie Scott Pilgrim versus the World has a lot of like true insight into my experience as a musician. The jamming in this film is some of the most realistic jamming I've seen on film, of just dirtbags making noise together and like grooving in it in like almost a nihilistic sensuality.
Your corner, Nana, Moorhen, Clara, the Owl, Night Hunter, Silent Killer. What have we got here? Lay an egg for me, little gingerbread. Lay an egg.
Frank says he must push us to our furthest corners and unlock the great music that hides there.
Squat.
Yeah. Okay.
Come on, lay an egg. Get that egg out. Squeeze that egg out.
It can feel a little overwhelming at times. But all in all, I am happy to be a part of this.
So much of my
Just
percentage
happy.
of my life was spent in a barn with this fuck next to me, and various others just fucking around.
Ladies and gentlemen, Justin calls it a barn. From what I understand, is it not a shack?
Oh, the barn is dead. I've got a shack now.
Okay.
No, there was a barn.
But now Justin has a shack, which is a lot more ominous.
But it's a lot nicer.
It is.
The actual barn was pretty decrepit.
But
Should we do a lads in the shack?
But yeah.
All right.
I'm so sick of hosting these.
But I remember being high on painkillers, recording a rock opera for a month.
Yeah.
With all of my buddies.
Yeah.
Literally climbing on the rafters with a microphone, screaming. This is so accurate.
So there's a part, and we talked about it a little bit at the beginning as a joke, but I think this movie knows that Michael Fassbender has a huge penis, because there's a segment in this movie where the John character played by Donald Gleason is in the hot tub. And he is naked in the hot tub. And he and Clara, the Maggie Gyllenhaal character, who is, like 15 years his senior? She's, middle-aged, and he's in his, late 20s.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So what?
So, yeah, I'm just saying. So they are arguing. Yeah, he's in the hot tub. And the sort of through line of the movie is that the Maggie Gyllenhaal character is sort of Frank's soulmate in a way, and she kind of doesn't want to give him up.
Yeah, I would also describe it as John is Frank's, plays the role in the film of Frank's superego, and she plays his id.
Very
Freudian.
Yeah.
Very Freudian, Justin.
That's accurate, though. The bulk of the film is kind of a struggle between John and what's her name, Jill?
Clara. You just took Maggie Gyllenhaal's last name and made part of it the character name.
Hi, I'm Jill Gyllenhaal.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Anyway, you were talking about Big Dick?
Yes. So Donald Gleason's character, in his fury, stands up naked in the hot tub. You can tell she gets one look at Donald Gleason's penis, and smash cut to them aggressively fucking. She tries to drown him.
Yeah. I found that pretty funny.
And it's funny that, like, the movie does that. Like, she gets one look at Donald Gleason's penis, they go at it, when you know in real life Michael Fassbender is packing it.
Man, Frank, I'm disappointed in that. I thought there was going to be more to that.
No, it's just a very funny thing that, like, that's the bit is, Donald Gleason's the one with the huge penis, not the Michael Fassbender character.
Yeah,
First of all,
that was written in the fucking script. That's
first of all, I don't
script.
think. Okay.
What I also appreciate about this segment is that there's a point, and I talked about it a little bit earlier, where he tries to play a song for the group because he funds their way through the shack for the next 11 months. So to prove his worth, he tries to get a song written for them that they can play on the album. And he starts to play it, and he is taken over by Frank and Clara, and they make it, quite frankly, better.
Yeah.
Plainly better. I don't think there's meant to... Maybe it's a failure of the music department, but I think the juxtaposition between the shit John was coming up with and what they were doing was meant to be like day and night.
Yeah. But
I mean, and I think a great scene was when Don shows John a song he wrote.
Can we stop talking about Michael Fassbender's Wang to talk about what a great character Don is? And his whole arc ends in this segment.
Yes.
It does. Which was weird to me.
Don and Frank had met in a
insane asylum.
An insane
mental
asylum.
Hospital.
Yes. We find out later that Don used to be the keyboardist in the band. And in a great scene, Don says, "Oh, you're working on a song, yeah." Shitty song. Yeah.
Well, no, it's even better than that, which kind of gets to a thing throughout in what we're talking about, the contrast between what John does and what everyone else does, where John is quietly working on his own and he's looking rather smug with himself, and then Don walks in and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" "Oh, I'm composing. Have a listen." And Don goes, "Yeah, I've been there, man. When you try to write a song and it just comes out shit."
Yeah.
So like we're already shitting on what John's writing, and then Don sits down and he plays this beautiful song with upon second viewing, a closer look at the lyrics, was a love song to mannequins, which the bit is that John,
the running joke is that he had sex with mannequins.
That was his version of insanity. And as John revealed that he has relationships with human women, but he has to get them to lay perfectly still.
Yeah.
Which perhaps a little problematic in some ways.
As long as it's consensual.
Yeah.
Hey, whatever. So, yeah, but then, so Don obviously is very talented, but he wants to be Frank, and he gives this speech about you may one day think that you can be Frank, and someday you might think that you are the Frank, but there can only be Frank.
Yeah.
And at other times he says, like, God, I want to be him so much. And he becomes sort of a facilitator for Frank. He kind of becomes their manager. He becomes their recording engineer. He kind of wrangles this John kid into it, you know. And you see a suicide attempt earlier.
Yes.
Where he wants to go into the lake and drown himself, and it gets played for laughs when he gets hit in the head by a rock to get him to stop from drowning himself. But then, like the plot synopsis said, they see a person in a Frank mask hanging, but then Frank walks up, so obviously that's not Frank there, and it's him. So he put on Frank's mask. He became Frank after helping him create his magnum opus, and then he kills himself.
Which is preceded by a beautiful fucking shot of they have just finished recording, and the camera's slowly panning in on Don. Everybody's
close pull in.
Yes. That's one of my favorite.
Yes.
They're passing beers between them. There's a lot going on. It's like the Last Supper. Frank is using a long straw to get to the beer. John has his beer taken away by Clara so she can have it first. But you're distracted by all this action, but it winds up on Don, who has this kind of relieved and dismayed and depressed, but
and he, as he's fully downing a bottle.
A Corona, yum, icy cold Corona that he's chugging. That's a great shot, and it's one of the few shots in the movie that I think is really good, and it's really because Scoot McNairy is a really good actor.
Yeah.
And the look on his face is really complicated and really painful because you can tell that he's, like you said, he's so happy that it's done. He's relieved. And then there's this just look of anguish for a moment on his face. And then the next scene is you find him dead, hanging from the tree. But what I will say, though, is aside from that shot and a couple of other aspects of the movie, this was the segment that made me think this director, Larry Abrahamson, is not good at directing comedy. Because there is a segment in this that has to use the dual principles of comedy and horror, which is tension and release. Mm-hmm. And it's the segment where John hears that Frank is in the shower. And he is singing to himself in the shower. And he's walking into the room. He sees Frank's head on the floor. So his immediate assumption is, oh, Frank has his mask off in the shower. I'm going to try to see what he looks like. The reveal is that Frank has another mask on in the shower, and it's covered in a plastic bag.
Hilarious.
The movie fails at creating a comedic moment and a sort of a vague horror moment because it's filmed completely wrong. There is no tension and there is no release to it because it's filmed in a reverse shot, where you see Donald Gleason's character walking into the frame, and the mask that he finds on the floor is only in sort of the bottom right of the frame, and you really only see it in your periphery.
Yeah.
So you don't get the full sense. It's not like you see him walking into the frame from the back. You see the mask off to the side if it's filmed that way, and you can see the mask in full, and you would see the door creaked open from his perspective. So there's tension there. There's buildup. And there's a sense of oh, is Frank going to look super fucked up? Is it going to be super scary? What's his face going to look like? And then the tension is released when the comedic reveal would be, oh, he's just wearing a papier-mâché mask in a bag.
Yeah.
But instead, it's filmed in a reverse shot. So you see Donald Gleason walking into the frame. The mask is off to the side. You're coming from the perspective of the door from the shower. And then it does a reverse shot into Frank in the shower. There's no tension. There's no laugh. There's no release. It's just, it falls completely flat. And that was one of those things where it's man, they should have gotten a better director for this, because that moment felt so bad.
But I think, I feel a little weird about this movie because all of the stuff that I said before of how real it feels. But as a film, but it relies so much on I think, great performances. Great, weird, surreal performances.
So,
including the drummer from Autolux.
Yes.
Is that who that was?
Yes, that is. Oh God, I had it pulled up and then I lost it. Fuck.
And Is the guitarist a musician?
No, he's a French actor. I
actor?
actually recognize him from that French show I watch called My
Francois Civil.
Yeah, Francois Civil, who plays what's his name? He's got a French name on that show called My Agent 10%, and he's the kid of the main guy, and it's hilarity ensues.
She was the drummer for Model. She is the drummer for Model X.
Yeah, and that's why she doesn't have too many lines. And hers is the most. She's a great drummer, and she's a joy to watch. And she does a great job here. Sort of the shtick of her character is that she's kind of mute, and the shtick of the other guy's character is that he speaks French, but everybody else just understands him, with the exception of John, which has two sort of comic moments. Which is one where John walks into the room, and it's the drummer and the guitarist, bassist, Barack is his name, and he says, "I don't know why he let you into the band. You disgust me." And John just smiles, goes, and says like his bastardization of the pronunciation, like dégoûté, yeah, man, which is like, you disgust me. And then later on, he comes in after Frank has a freak out, and he's laying in the bed. And he goes to Brock. He goes, "Is he okay?" And Brock goes, "Ito." He goes, "He's dead?" He goes, "Putain, asleep." And Putain is a fucker.
Let's talk about. We'll get to some of the other stuff in the last segment, but let's talk about the character of Frank.
Yes.
Because this movie could be... Frank is not a real person. He's not based on a single real person.
No, he's not based on Frank Sidebottom.
No. The head is based off of that. I think, like, very much so, the affability, the niceness of him, and... naivete is very much Daniel Johnston.
I think he's 100% more Daniel Johnston than anyone else.
Yes.
Especially when we get to the end.
Yes.
Because there's stuff at the end that is reminded me directly of The Devil and Daniel Johnston.
Oh,
the
100%. But I mean, in terms of the output and art, is still very much a Daniel Johnston thing, but also a Captain Beefheart. Especially in terms of the recording session, was very much taken from the recording session of Trout Mass Replica.
Trout Mass Replica, yeah. His music is much more sophisticated than Daniel Johnston's music is.
Yeah. But you were saying earlier that you really like the music. And
yes.
And I don't know if I like it. I think it serves its purpose perfectly, which is a placeholder for actual experimental music.
It's the fakey Hollywood version of experimental music for sure.
And I think that they got very damn close, and it really worked. But I also don't think that. I think with a bit of a wink, which I appreciate, that because we talk about so many times when we talked about the Twilight Zone, that the Come Wander With Me really relied on that song having to be great.
Yes.
This movie doesn't have to rely on the music being actually great and experimental. They just have to show you that it is in that direction. And I think they did a good job with that. I heard an interview with John Ronson, and initially he was trying to get various artists, including like Tom Waits, to write some stuff for the movie, but a lot of that fell through. And I think it's mostly a single guy. I forget his name, but he's a musician who did most of all of the music.
Yeah, I will say in particular, I like the first song that you hear from them, Ginger Crouton.
Salted joints. Tuna and brine. Deep dark swallow nights. Undertow the broken fork back together. scallop seared and wrinkled skin. Comb the cockles from his beard. Know your five and next of kin. Push the baby, cut the cord. Spread the feast upon the board. Coming out. Emerging.
I think that's a really fun sort of facsimile of sort of fakey outsider artist music.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. It's supposed to be sort of a glib, shiny version of Daniel Johnston or Captain Beefheart, or maybe not Wesley Willis. Like it maybe gets a little bit Wesley Willis, but like
yeah.
Do we want to talk about this now, or do we want to talk about this at the end?
Well,
because
let's move the plot.
Let's move to plot.
Okay, let's move with the plot a little, and then finish off with.
Where we were.
By the way, the name of the drummer is Carla Azar.
Yes, yeah, she played on a bunch of Jack White records. She's really
great. Good. Yeah, I mean, and somebody can confirm or deny this, but I think the deal was that most of the actual instrumental playing was real.
I think it very well could be there. Most of the band performed on the Colbert Report, including Maggie Gyllenhaal and Domhnall Gleeson. So I think that they may have been playing.
And that was definitely Michael Fassbender singing.
Which fuck you, Michael Fassbender, for one, being so handsome, two, so talented of an actor, having such a great voice and such a huge hog.
Here's the thing. Yeah, he's like a really good singer. And there was a moment in the middle segment in Ireland where they even make use of the fact that his native language is German. Because German tourists come up and Frank just speaks fluent German. It's like, oh, right.
That's a weird moment.
Yeah.
Now, that's a moment. See, there's a dual thing happening in this film, which is sort of the starry-eyed mythology that a normie like John thinks these people has. So he thinks perhaps that Frank is a magical being who can speak all languages. And it's kind of this weird cornball moment where he's sort of like... it's kind of like this. It feels like a trite bit. I can't think of another example where he speaks to her. You can't hear what they're saying, but they start acting erratically, and he sort of has like he transforms her life, but we don't know what he said. It's like the thing that Bill Murray says to what's her face at the end of Lost in Translation. It's this magical transformative thing, and she's like thanking him profusely, and he's like this Saint Francis of Assisi. He can speak all languages and befriend everyone. So we think that, I mean, Barack speaks French, they all understand it. He can magically speak German, but then we find out there is no magic, that he's just a regular person with mental illness. And, maybe in Bluff, Kansas, he just studied German in high school or something, something really mundane like that.
A thing along those lines, though, too, that I want to point out is that, yes, he is kind of throughout a lot of it, almost a Mary Sue. Like, he is this magical thing.
He's a manic pixie dream boy.
Yes. But the thing I appreciate is the John character, I think he doesn't, he's dazzled by Frank, but throughout none of the movie does he understand Frank. He's always like using Frank, but it's not a sort of thing where he's like idolizing him as much as it could have been. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He doesn't worship him as a god. He's jealous of what he thinks.
Yes.
Which is that he was this suffering lunatic, and that is the source of his creative genius.
Yeah.
And he even says that when he learns that he's from Bluff, Kansas, and that he was in a mental institute, and he's like, oh, abusive childhood, which he didn't have, we find out later, and mental illness, where can I find such inspiration? But that's actually a pretty heavy theme of the movie. It's played for a joke in that moment, but I think it's maybe the main sort of thing that the film struggles with.
Well, I'm going to read the rest of this, but there's a lot, so I'm just going to do it off the top of my head. They go to America because they're going to play South by Southwest. Frank is enamored with the fact that so many people are fans of the music because they have gotten so many hits on YouTube. When they get there, though, everything starts falling apart. They try to have a beautiful moment throwing Don's ashes in the Texas desert.
Yes.
Which turns out to be something that's not his ashes.
Gronut, the liquid vitamin supplement that Frank drinks through a straw.
Mm-hmm.
I was dreading that they were going to just rehash The Big Lebowski, and they kind of do for a second, but then they
as the ashes blow in the wind back onto the people standing there.
Creative differences ensue. Claire stabs John. The band falls apart. John fucks everything up. John and Frank perform live. Should I just read this?
No, go ahead. I mean, they perform live.
They perform live. It goes terribly because they're performing John's music. Everything falls apart. Frank runs away.
He gets hit by a car. His
head is smashed. John finds the rest of the band playing in a bar. And then he finds Frank at his childhood home and learns the truth. And in the end brings the band back together and walks off knowing he fixed what he fucked up. This is one of those movies that I love, like My Best Friend's Wedding, which is the main character, the point of view character of the film is the villain of the film.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he is 100% the bad guy. There's even a point in the South by Southwest section where he's like, all right, what we got to do is we got to make it twee indie pop, which is they make a joke out of the twee indie pop that plays, the corporate indie that plays in Austin, Texas, and especially at South by Southwest. There's like a scene where they're in a diner, like it's supposed to be kind of an IHOP type thing, and there's like a lady and she's playing little twinkly guitar.
We gotta talk about this moment.
Yes.
So, all right, how to measure my words carefully, because I've made a lot of friends over the years at open mics, and I hosted an open mic for a number of years. But before and after, my attitude toward open mics is that I loathe them.
Yes.
And I dread them.
Open mics are the worst.
And a little bit of true life musician accuracy here is that, like, the two girls who are sort of the people who discover John through social media, invite them to South by, and are checking them in. They're like, hey, come get some food with us, and there's an open mic. It's going to be great. Jump cut to them sort of kind of gritting their teeth and bearing it as this girl is playing this wonderfully terrible facsimile of a twee song on a ukulele, where she's just like kind of like Frank stringing together buzzwords, but like twee buzzwords like knee socks, boyfriend.
Yeah.
And after John sort of decides to take them in the direction of making more likable music, Maggie Gyllenhaal storms off and says, I'm not playing a fucking ukulele. Yes. And I have to be very careful because some dear friends of mine are primary ukulele players. This was before the utter ascension and dominance of the ukulele in musical culture.
I think it was kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
Like, I think this was hitting at a thing that was current.
Yeah.
At the time. So I want to talk about just sort of the very end of the movie where John goes to Frank's childhood home.
Yes.
Because that was the thing that made me realize that, like, oh, they're not doing Frank's side bottom at all. No. They're kind of doing Daniel Johnston.
Yes.
Because if anyone out there has seen the documentary The Devil and Daniel Johnston,
it's incredible.
It's a great documentary. We should do it for the show. Yeah. Probably.
Definitely.
Daniel Johnston is a man with severe bipolar disorder who lives in Austin, Texas, and has recorded a lot of outsider music through the years, through several decades, and has largely lived with his parents who have dealt with his severe mental illness pretty much as best they can and as best as they are equipped. But one of the points of that documentary is that, like, yes, Daniel Johnston is a genius, but his life would be better if his mental health was more under control.
Yeah.
And one of the things that the father of the Frank character says is to the effect of his music isn't good because of his mental health issues. If anything, his music would be better and he would be more productive if it was more under control.
Yeah.
The thing with the paper mache head was my fault because I encouraged it and he never stopped wearing it. And at the end of the movie, you see him without the head and he's handsome as Michael Fassbender, but he has scars all around his head, which I originally interpreted as cranial scars from some sort of extensive brain surgery, but Wikipedia tells me is scars from long-term wearing of the
Yeah, I always kind of just saw them as like where the strap was always.
I might be completely alone in this. So here's how I came to this movie. I watched it like 3 years ago, and I would see the thumbnail on Netflix all the time, and it's just the Frank head. And I was like, oh, that looks weird, and okay, oh well. And I moved on and would go watch Frasier. Then finally I watched the movie, knowing nothing about it, just reading the description that it's about music. And so I'm watching this whole movie, and then we see Frank without the head, and it's Michael Fassbender, which I had no idea. And
well, because he's doing a very convincing Midwestern accent.
He's doing something which I find. I'm watching The Leftovers currently, and Doctor Who plays a
Christopher Eccleston, and
the accent he does is the same as Frank, which is okay. I'm just gonna talk weird.
It is. It's like a weird. It kind of reminds me of the dude from American Movie.
How's it going?
I'm from America.
That is a weird sort of American accent to it.
Yeah.
I'm from Bluff, Kansas.
But there's a phenomenon that I experience sometimes, which is there's an actor you see all the time, and you don't trust them. You don't really care one way or the other about them, but you kind of dislike them for no good reason. And then you see them in a certain role, and it changes your opinion of them, including all of the past things you've seen. And that was this for me with Michael Fassbender. He was a known person at the time.
He was, and he chose to do this whole movie in a mask.
For the most part. Yeah, head. That's a fucking amazing.
Yeah.
A film with $1 million budget and that grossed $1.9 million at the box office. So
that's true. But he was a known quantity.
Well, my point being that that's nothing. I mean, nobody really made any money on it,
including they also, like I said, played the Colbert Report. There are live videos of them. The band played some gigs. This was, and you can kind of tell it's not necessarily perfect. But you can tell it's something that everybody involved believed in this film.
And wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I found it very compelling. I thought it was a beautiful film. I thought it got a lot of what it's like to be a musician dead on. And if you knew me in my youth, including high school, and before that, I... from the age of 10 until maybe age of 20, I compulsively wore a jacket at all times. There were 2 jackets, a members only jacket for a youth soccer league, and then later on an army jacket. I mean, eventually, once I sort of got over the compulsive need to constantly wear it, I still wore it as, a jacket, but I would take it off when it was warm. But I didn't do that, and I would always be seen, and so sort of it's a little whimsical, but it's not hard for me to imagine treating something like a paper mache head as a transitional security blanket object, and it getting out of hand. I wore a piece of duct tape on my hand for 3 years straight. I'm probably gonna
seriously where
on my palm, because I was. I don't know. I thought maybe I had a wart on my hand, and I hated the idea of it spreading, and I still to this day don't know if it is actually just a little wart or just a scar from the time I tried to dig it out. And God knows what I absorbed. I'm probably going to die from cancer because of all the chemicals and the adhesive I absorbed over that 3-year period. But
it probably not more than you would have just regularly putting any perspirant on.
Yeah, and I mean, we all got to die of something, but my point being that sort of compulsive things like that, it was, and it's sort of the letdown, the moment they could have done more with it, I think, but sort of the whole film is in the moment when John goes to Bluff and talks to his parents.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the whole film where John goes, "What happened? What happened to him that he did this?" And they go, "Nothing happened.
Nothing.
He has mental illness.
He had a good childhood. It's mental illness."
And
he asked to wear the papier-mâché head one day, and he was like, "I thought it was for a costume party. It wasn't for a costume party." And he said, "The worst thing I could have done was encourage it, but that's what I did." And he never took it off.
And they have this little montage where John, it's the opening of the film, where he's walking through his British hometown and sort of sees these humdrum people who are very pleasant and lovely, but he's thinking, about his song he's writing, and you can tell he's kind of chafed by it. But then when he gets to Bluff, Kansas, they structure an identical scene where he's walking down the street and there's somebody washing a car, a boy on a bicycle, an old couple walking. And it sort of demonstrates that, and he even says it when he's talking to them, that it was a lovely childhood just like his own. The difference being that, yes, he had this great talent, but also that he had mental illness, and the two didn't come as a package deal. And a small thing that I found while Googling just now, that this is going to be of interest to no one, but the John's seaside hometown is actually Bray in County Wicklow in Ireland, where my uncle lived, and I've been there many times, and I'm surprised I didn't realize it while watching the film.
Shout out to Tom's uncle.
He's been dead since the 90s.
One thing I will say, when he has that line where he says, "Oh, he had a great childhood," that is in direct contrast of what Don, the Scoot McNairy character, says is like, "Oh, he had this horrible, abusive childhood growing up, and that was the pain that caused him to wear the mask." And then you realize, no, his parents were great.
Yeah.
And that was the other point of The Devil and Daniel Johnston, is that his parents are great. He's just difficult for reasons that aren't his fault.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that the film doesn't, it's just that single scene, and it's just literally like those single lines. They're not presenting their thesis. They're providing a very realistic snapshot of this character, these characters. And I think it's beautiful. And then there's the scene of Frank finally without his mask coming upon his old band and them just improvising this song, I Love You All.
Yeah, and he starts with "I love your wall," and "I love your wall" becomes "I love you all."
Mm-hmm. And for a scene like this, like it's almost a musical theater scene that it would suddenly happen. It felt real because it was a very simple song.
Yeah.
But it made me cry. Look out for it on Instagram. Well, Frank was a really good movie. Frank, my boy, Frankie.
It was.
It was a good movie, Frankie.
I thought it had a kind of like a cosmic scope of various things.
Oh, boys. We usually talk about music on this podcast.
Let's not.
No. Let's talk about the show Cosmos with Carl Sagan.
Yes. Not the Neil deGrasse Tyson one.
Not the Neil deGrasse Tyson one. Billions and billions.
Billions and billions. Billions and we are made of star stuff.
The Neil deGrasse Tyson one just goes, "Hey now, I'm a sex criminal."
And hello, I'm Michio Kaku, coming at you with the next one.
Is he doing it?
I think so. Unless
he's the not rapist.
Yes. And then after him, there's nobody.
There's nobody because Stephen Hawking's fucking dead.
Yes, he is. I saw him on Star Trek. That was fun.
He was playing himself.
It was fun.
It was fun. It was him and Albert Einstein, I believe, playing chess.
And
Poker, Frank.
And
poker,
what's his
poker,
name?
Poker, yes.
Socrates. No, the British guy.
Isaac Newton.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, Frankie Cosmos. Wait,
I'm not.
I floated in and started living. Asked a Bundy, asked you a question. What are you doing? What are you doing?
We're doing Frankie Cosmos. We're doing the album Next Thing by Frankie Cosmos from April 1st, April Fool's Day, 2016. Weren't we all the fool that year?
Yes, we were. I distinctly remember that year with you three, where we were all just like, there was mounting dread throughout so much of it, where we were just like, is it going to happen? Nah.
That's dumb. You're dumb. Shut up, Frank.
Released on Bayonet Records. It is the second of 3 records by Frankie Cosmos, the stage name of one Greta Klein. Factoid, Greta Klein being the daughter of actor Kevin Klein.
Or as I like to call him, better, non-problematic Kevin Spacey.
Or as I like to call him, the guy I confused with Bill Pullman.
Oh.
No, you're thinking of Bill Paxton.
I don't think anyone's thinking of Bill Paxton.
Oh, he's dead.
I think about
Game
Bill Paxton all the
over,
time.
man.
Game over, man. It's a bug hunt. I think about Bill Paxton all the time because of the movie that Justin and I just quoted, Aliens, by Bames Bamron.
So, this is a record of many songs. It's 28 minutes long. It features Greta Klein and various sundry others playing instruments. It's indie rock. We were talking about twee indie rock, and now we have an album.
The reaction I had.
So here's how we've recently, or at least in the future, or have been planning episodes, is that I look back at my iPhone at the screenshots of Shazam of whenever I listen to WPRB, and we're making our way through those. And I heard the song Fool from this album.
Your name is a triangle. Your heart is a square. I love to see you way over there. Once I was happy, you found it intriguing. Then you got to me and left me.
Wait for the clip. And I loved it. I thought
Tom is doing a fucking Rubik's Cube, and I'm
Yeah,
sorry if you can hear that, ladies and gentlemen. He is so not listening to Justin.
I can do 2 things at once.
I listened to the song and I liked it a lot. So then we listened to the whole album.
What do you have to say, Justin?
I like it. I like it a lot. Also, I don't know who it's for. And
I can tell you who it's for, but I'll let you keep going.
Justin, why is your butthole so tight right now? Not that I would know.
This is
This got it in your face. How could you not know?
This is the music of so I'm playing a show in Philadelphia. My friend is headlining the show, and I'm opening up. And
his butthole.
And so I go in and this band is playing. And I stand there and listen to them, and I love it. I think this is awesome. And I even go so far as to buy the EP that they're selling, which I then lives in the trunk of my car, and I never listen to it again. It is. Am I a bad person?
I mean,
No.
yeah, but I don't see what that has to do with this record.
I think it is supremely listenable. I think any music that is like this, limited distortion, incredibly melodic, very poppy. This is. I would not mind this playing in a Target.
Wow. I'm going to give you a chance to take this one again, buddy.
Fine, Pancheros. It's very.
You made me mess up my Rubik's Cube.
It's very good, listenable indie pop. All right. We're not being completely fair. We're all
No,
tired.
we're not.
I'm a sleepy boy. I think this is a super melodic, catchy album, and there are a few tracks on here. I believe it's called Embody.
Sarah is alive, deep. From picture Jonah said it makes me so happy. She embodies all the grace and lightness. It's Sunday night, and my friends are friends with my friends. It shows me they embody all the grace and lightness.
Which is just there are actually a few songs on here which are like love songs for your friends, which I think is a really beautiful sentiment. It's like and rare songs, but like They Are Friends of Mine by the Zombies. But there's like the beautiful line, like I don't remember. You'll listen to it. Here's a clip. and for an album that is so much about the travails of modern romantic love and friend love, it ends on a dark, ominous note with the song "O Dreaded Sea Town."
Where are you now? I don't really care who you're around, who you're making scared. I don't know or care to know. I don't care or know to care.
Clip. Frank, do you have anything to say about that song?
Oh, Dreaded Seatown, like, it's kind of a cool song. It has that sort of weird vibe that does not super exist on this album for the most part. But,
Yeah.
like, I also think, like, there are two moods on this album that I appreciate. I think that I appreciate the musical mood of Oh, Dreaded Seatown, and I appreciate the lyrical mood of Sappho.
Can you feel me in the air? Under the crack in the door. Can you tell I have no floor? And I'm shivering, just thinking, where have you been all these minutes?
Too, because, like, I think the song Sappho sort of gets into that weird space of, like, unknowing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's an erotic unknowing that the song is hinting at.
Yeah.
But, like, it's kind of melancholy, but a little fearful. And that's what struck me, is because when I was listening to it this morning, the weather was a little bit nice out, but the sky was getting pretty gray because we were starting to get some pretty bad rainstorms on my way to work. And that's when Sappho hit. And I was like, ooh, this is, like, vibing really well with what the environment is doing. And there's a lyric in the middle where she says, oh, I'm sorry if I've been a real bad friend. Your face too close to mine to hear you talk. And that's that sort of charge of both, like, friendship and eroticism kind of thing that I really appreciate that she was doing pretty much this whole album.
I think one of the reasons, perhaps, that we had trouble clicking with this record, and we were wondering who it's for, I think kind of a unavoidable aspect of the answer to that question is I just checked using the Google machine, and Greta Klein's only 25 currently, which means when this came out, she was 22, which means when they were tracking it, she was probably maybe 21.
20.
And she even has a song.
Clip? I'm 20.
I'm 20.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it relates to it relates to youth, first of all, which we're kind of leaving those blocks.
None of the three of us are on the other side of.
I honestly, my anecdote about like playing a show in Philly, what really, and why I kind of ask like who this is for, is this album makes me feel very nostalgic. This album, I guess we're not that old. That, like, yeah, around the maybe a bit before the time of this album, there was a lot of music like this out there, and that's why I kind of ask who was this for, because it kind of feels a little. This is a kind of old album, but I felt a little anachronistic.
Yeah. Was
like I could see this on what was the MTV2 show Subterranean. I could see them playing this on Subterranean and me loving it. Speaking of Autolux, and I could see young me loving this album. And I will. Well, one thing that I really genuinely do love about it, there's a lot of songs. A lot of them are very short songs, and
this was a super short record.
Well, and it's a short,
super short record,
and I think the album kind of works like that. It kind of works as like a concept album in that it's a tone piece. You know what I mean? For like that time in your life, for it makes it feel it reminds me of the movie Adventureland.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say it reminds me of Juno.
Yes, which is absolutely...
It's pretty twee. Although, when I listened to it on my phone speakers, I thought, man, this is twee. Then I listened to it on bigger speakers, and I'm like, this is less twee than I recall it being earlier.
Yeah.
So listen to it on big speakers if you got them.
Yes. It'll be less twee for you.
Or good headphones.
There's an aesthetic code. I don't know what to call it. It all follows. Like to get music gear nerd on you, they are replete with Dan Electros, which are just sort of like the raspiest little baby voiced guitars and basses. They're made of plywood and are painted fun flip-flop colors.
You say Dan Electro, right? They're the ones that
donated to Proposition 8.
Yes, they're cool guitars. I want one, but I can't.
Just make one of your own.
Yeah.
It's made of pine and particle board. Anyway. Speaking of next things, Dr. Frasier Crane.
Dr. Frasier Crane is sick. Remember I watched it a month ago. He's afraid he'll lose his job because he's sick. He's a fucking asshole to Daphne. Oh well. Frasier Crane's Day Off, Season 1, Episode 21, possibly. It's a fun episode.
So in his dream sequence, in his fever dream, KACL blows up.
Does it?
Yeah, as you recall, if you watched it sooner than a month ago.
Who's our first caller?
We have Sonia from Auburn on line 3.
Let's just hear what Sonia has to say.
Daphne!
What is it this time?
I had a dream. They are plotting against me.
Yeah, something about a bomb going off. Yeah, he kills everyone with a bomb. Or they blow him up with a bomb. Because they want him to die.
What they should do is blow up Martin Crane with the bomb.
What did Martin do this episode?
I don't remember because I also watched it a month ago.
He keeps telling stories about times when he was sicker than Frasier is currently, and graphic stories about him having like diarrhea and vomiting and things.
Oh, and he tells like a really graphic story about his like getting shot in the hip too, and he's like, I got shot in the hip because I'm a cop who likes to beat up black people.
Oh my God!
Frank, stop scuttling this episode. It was pretty funny. We get to hear
that, ladies and gentlemen.
I think we get, for a second time, we get Niles on the air, and for a second out of at least 3 times, we see that he's potentially even better than Frasier at this radio game.
Yes! Yes! Howard, she loves you! What about you? Howard? You gonna just pack up your emotional tent and walk away? Howard? Howard, it's up to you. Can you say it? Can you?
Come on, Howard. Come on, Howard.
I love you too, Lois.
Yeah! He said it!
I'm afraid we're gonna have to
This is pretty good.
magical moment with a commercial.
Good, the little rat is scintillating.
Yes, because like he starts out really bad, and then he builds up a rapport with the callers in a way that Frasier is not amenable to, because like he reduces the distance and he gets really emotionally invested in the callers. Like and that's the running joke.
He even comes up with a better catchphrase where he says, "Let's get better."
Yes,
and it seems very natural. And Frasier can't have any of this, so he decides to take a bunch of drugs. Because after all, he is a physician, so he writes himself his own prescriptions. And he goes in there.
Which also, that seems illegal, right? Is that illegal?
I think it's fine. I don't know.
Also, I believe they wrote this episode purely around Kelsey Grammer being drunk and them having to fit a story around what they shot.
Kind of like this episode.
Well, because he was mugging pretty severely this entire episode, which is good. Like, that's what he's really good at, is that kind of extreme mugging. But he's also not giving much of a performance beyond that.
I mean... I don't know. It was funny. We got to see him follow the trails of somebody's hand, checking to see if he's high.
Frasier, your eyes look a little glassy.
Look fine. It's just that the drugs I took have some minor side effects.
Frasier, look at me. Do you see trails when I do this?
Whoa! I wasn't doing that before.
Yes.
He stumbles his words together in a really pleasingly silly way.
There's great makeup work on him because he decides to go to the studio sick. And there's great bags under eyes makeup that comes across, even though this is like a 25-ish-year-old sitcom that was filmed on video in like a multi-camera format, that makeup still looks really good. Like he looks convincingly ill, even on like a streaming platform.
Or Justin's theory. He was just
drunk.
Pretty delightful. 10 out of 10.
I don't remember it. I think it was okay.
It was funny, but I think it's a little too silly for what the show was doing at this point in its lifespan. Because previous episodes had done a much better balancing act between the sort of silly, absurdist comedy and a little bit more of the intelligent adult pathos that it had been working in. So this is kind of purely silly, which it does better in later seasons. Controversially, I like the episode where Niles and Frasier keep wanting to go to the spa that Cam Winston gets into, and they end up in the alleyway. Tom hates that episode.
Should we say it now? We're never going to get to that episode. Tom and I, right before we started this podcast, decided to revisit an episode we both thought was great, was like one of the best, and it does not hold up.
Cam Winston. Cam Winston's not in the episode.
I love Cam Winston.
He's the greatest, but this episode that you're referring to, the one with the spa, it's just the performances are really flat. The jokes aren't as funny as I remember. And I think they had it was very late, and I think they had just gone to a higher definition, and you could see a lot more of their faces, and everybody just looked a lot older. Their facial performances were a lot less emphatic than you recall, because you're seeing a lot more. The aspect ratio was different too. Yeah, it just really, really fell flat, and I just remember it being hysterical.
Yeah, and that's why I was very pleasantly surprised when we did start this podcast that so far this season, there have been some rocky moments, but has been solid and what I remember Frasier to be.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, like,
but I'm worried.
It does take a dip.
Yeah,
it takes a dip near the end, but it's actually like, it's not the worst dip that a show has ever gone through.
Yeah.
Tom, you say this all the time, and I agree with it. It's one of the only shows to accurately address the insanity of the Iraq War near the end of its lifespan.
Yeah, there's a great kind of like Arthur Miller-esque allegory of the post 9/11 jingoism, and it had to do with a massive American flag on the roof of the building that
involving Cam Winston.
And it's something he wanted, but he was doing it just to get at Frasier because it blocked Frasier's view from his apartment. And every time Frasier said, "Hey, this is blocking my view," Cam just said, "How could you be so unpatriotic?" Really, yeah, no, it's a great show. This is a wacky, zany episode. Eddie the dog dies in this one. He comes back in the next episode. The Eagle Eye Observer will notice that there are not one, not two, but 3 Rosses in this one.
Yeah, one of them goes to the Black Lodge. She's a tulpa. And the other has blue hair.
Space, the final frontier, whether it is noble.
Here's what I want to happen in the Picard show.
What?
Here's what I want to happen in the Picard show. At the end of the first season, there's like this big season-long arc, and then it's all revealed to have not happened, and you hear a voice from behind Picard, and it's, "Hello, Picard."
Oh. How could it not be that?
Yeah.
It's gotta be, right?
It has to be. Recommendation.
What are you gonna listen to or watch or read or eat or do? I love you. Recommendations. I want to recommend 2, a film and a mini series that I have grown in my mind in terms of how much I love them. That I coincidentally have recently been reading the source material that they are based on. I want to recommend the movie Kaidan, which we should do on the podcast at some point. It's grown in my mind. I think it's my favorite movie of all time.
Really?
I think so. It's a couple of the segments there. It's based on ghost stories written by Lefcadio Hearn, and it's some of the most beautiful imagery I've ever seen on film.
Yeah, it's a great film.
And I also want to recommend one of my favorite things ever from television. I've recently been I started to read the book of short stories that it was based off of. Olive Kittredge from a while ago, starring Frances McDormand and Richard Jenkins.
Oh yeah,
Richard Jenkins.
In Shape of Water.
Yes, Richard Jenkins, my favorite actor of all time, and Frances McDormand. Just look it up, watch it. It's one of my favorite things ever on television, and especially. We need to remember that there are great things made for adults on television. Not everything has to be the shit that is Game of Thrones.
Tom, you next or me next?
I'd like to recommend the 2016 album by Frankie Cosmos. Next thing. If you want some,
if you want to
aesthetically consistent indie pop, dealing with the issues faced by many young people out there in the world dating as the daughter of Kevin Kline. It hits the nail on the head.
Tom cut out a lot of stuff that we had to say earlier in the episode.
I think it's going to stay in. I have confidence.
I don't know.
It is not. Your confidence is misplaced.
Don't worry, Frank. I'll re-record it and post it as a Instagram live rant later tonight.
So I am going to recommend two things. So the first thing I'm going to recommend is I am a person who has recently subscribed to the Criterion Channel. The Criterion Channel rules. The selection is amazing. I've gone through the Columbia Noir selection, which is awesome. In particular, like My Name is Julia Ross, Murder by Contract, all these movies from the 40s that have been forgotten that are amazing. But I particularly found a film called To Sleep with Anger, directed by a guy named Charles Burnett, who was famous for directing a film called Killer of Sheep in the 1970s, which was famously sort of a spiritual basis for David Gordon Green's debut feature, George Washington. Charles Burnett is one of the probably one of the greatest filmmakers in American history, but he only made 3 films. He made Killer of Sheep, My Brother's Wedding, and this third film, To Sleep with Anger. And To Sleep with Anger is a film from the early 90s starring Danny Glover as a sort of demonic figure. And the film is based on sort of Southern Black American folklore. It's about a family who has moved from the South to South Central Los Angeles, and they have gained all of the sort of middle-class values and accoutrement that comes with that, but they still carry the old values of their folk culture. And Danny Glover's character shows up on their doorstep one day, and suddenly they know him. And it's implied that he is a demonic sort of devil figure that brings back the past and stirs up tensions and hatred and family torment just by being there. And he does things that can't be explained, and he brings back people from the old South in ways that they don't remember. Like, they don't remember these people. They thought they're being brought back from the grave. And I don't want to spoil too much of it. It's got a lot of great performances in it, aside from Danny Glover, but Danny Glover is amazing. It's quite unlike, I think, any movie I've ever seen, but it is entirely accessible. It is really interesting and wonderful. I don't want to spoil too much of it because one of the joys in the movie is the way that it resolves itself based on folk logic. Kind of like a Guillermo del Toro thing. But it's wonderful. To Sleep with Anger. Go check it out if you can either buy the Criterion or get the Criterion Channel or watch it through any number of other means. The other thing I want to recommend is something that I just binge watched, and it is A Very English Scandal, which is an Amazon Prime thing that was nominated and won a bunch of like Emmys and Golden Globes, but it is better than you think it is. It is the true story of British Liberal Party leader Jeremy Thorpe, who was poised to be the next prime minister and the first Liberal Party prime minister of the 20th century in the late 1960s and early 1970s, except that he was a closeted gay man who had an affair with a much younger man named Norman Scott, played in the TV series by Ben Whishaw, who is wonderful, and Jeremy Thorpe is played by Hugh Grant. The series is written by Russell T Davies, who famously rebooted Doctor Who and had a bunch of shows like Queer as Folk and The Second Coming, and is a great TV writer. But is directed in all 3 episodes by Stephen Frears, who is also a wonderful director. But it is a story about like the emergence of gay men in the contemporary consciousness, especially in the 20th century and especially in Britain, and how it played out from before homosexuality was decriminalized and afterwards, and how even afterwards they were still stigmatized and marginalized, and how these two characters, this established politician and this much younger man, walk on this knife edge of pathos and sort of monstrousness and likability and not being likable. but how ultimately the worst thing you can be is a powerful person, because it turns you into this hollow sort of husk of a human being. And no matter how problematic the younger man, the Norman Scott character was, and how needy and sort of wishy-washy he was, and how unlikable he could be, he was still a fundamentally decent human being who did not deserve the way he was treated. So Jeremy Thorpe plans to kill him and is put on trial for the attempted murder, and that's something that happened in real life. And the way it plays out is really wonderful. The writing is excellent. The acting is amazing across the board. And it's only 3 episodes long. It's a very short miniseries, so check it out. A Very English Scandal.
Huh?
I'm sorry, your mic turned off, Frank.
Oh, no. Fellas, what are we doing next week?
Oh, God. Shut up, Frank. You know that's not a thing anymore. Next week? What the fuck are you talking about?
Next time we might be doing get ready to bleep it, Tom. Hey, you cunts and cocksuckers. We might be doing a Deadwood thing.
Cocksuckers.
The Deadwood movie's coming out. Doo-dah, doo-dah. Everybody give a shout. Oh, the doo-dah day. Hey!
We are doing Deadwood the movie. We are doing A Fistful of Datas, which takes place in Deadwood, South Dakota. What was the album?
We're not doing an album that week.
Okay.
No music either of these weeks.
Ever again.
Don't forget to follow the Plaid Lads on Instagram and Twitter at PlaidLadsPod. You can check out music made by Justin. Welcome to wonderfalls.bandcamp.com, where he has 4 Christmas albums. You can see some things that made him cry at Some Things That Made Me Cry on Instagram. It's pretty funny. Check it out. Me, Tom, I have music. It's called Elbow Ache. It's all over the internet, including Spotify and iTunes. Go check it out. elbowache.bandcamp.com. Also, look at my social media, and you'll see where I'm playing shows around here sometime. Come say hello. Don't forget to rate us on iTunes. If you leave us 5 stars, we will read it on the air. You can drag us all you want. Say whatever you want about our 3 hosts. We'll read it. We're gluttons for abuse. And now I leave you with the comic stylings of Franklin McDevitt.
Fellas, I did not throw Natalie Wood off a boat.
Jesus Christ.
I've got a fever. And the only prescription. Where you going, Frank? Somewhere exotic? That is from Catch Me If You Can. And also it has the word Frank in it.
Keep going, keep going.
Go, man, go.
You know how I know you're lonely? You got no one else to call. That is me, Tom Hanks, in Catch Me If You Can. Knock, knock, who's there? Go fuck yourself. That's a joke I tell in that movie. It's me, Tom Hanks. And it's me, Leonardo DiCaprio, doing the same accent. It's not Abagnale, it's not Abagnale, it's Abagnale. That's me, Frank Abagnale. Leonardo DiCaprio. I have sex with Martin Sheen's daughter, who I think is played by Amy Adams. And then Jennifer Garner is a prostitute, and she deals cards at me. Catch Me If You Can, ladies and gentlemen. It's a movie where everyone has a Northeast accent for some reason.